Wisconsin's April 3rd race for state Supreme Court is now set, with two judges, Milwaukee County's Rebecca Dallet and Sauk County's Michael Skrenok, coming out of the primary last week. Skrenok won with a plurality, 46% of the vote, followed by Dallet at 36%. Madison area attorney Tim Burns, who had run as an unabashed progressive in the officially nonpartisan race, was eliminated. There are already indications that outside special interest groups will be active in this race, and we're talking more about that and the race ahead with retired Supreme Court Justice Janine Geske. It's good to have you back on the program.
Nice to be here, Mike.
Before we talk about the race ahead, let's talk about what happened on Tuesday night and whether or not there are any lessons from the Tim Burns experience, a candidate who ran openly, very transparently as a progressive.
It was interesting to watch and try to figure out how his particular campaign was going to do. After the Bernie Sanders success and in getting large amounts of votes, but he was so out there. I moderated one debate with him, and he, it was as though he was telling you how he was going to vote on every political case. And I think the Wisconsinites still want a judge who's going to look at a case and decide it on its merits and not have an openly political agenda. Now, there certainly may be a philosophy that affects them, but that open political partisan agenda just didn't work. So he didn't do as well as I thought he did because he'd been working very hard at his campaign.
Do you think in the end of the day there's also this feeling in Wisconsin amongst voters that we want somebody who's a judge to sit on the bench?
Well, I think that's always part of it. You don't have to be a judge to be on the Supreme Court, and we've had a number of very fine justices who are not judges first. But I think when people don't know who to pick, there's something about having judge in front of your name and having that judicial experience that makes a difference for voters on that, because it's hard for people to know who to vote for.
At the end of the day, do you think the Burns experience changes the way campaigns look in the future? Maybe other candidates will be reluctant to go that route because of what happened with him?
I do. I think it was an experiment that didn't work. And if it didn't work now with all the political turmoil nationally and things that are going on, I think we're not there as a state that we want to have partisan judges. Texas elects partisan justices, but I think the Wisconsinites really want somebody who's a judge and looks at the case impartially.
Let's take a look at the race ahead. And already there are indications that we're going to see a fair amount of special interest money in this race. In the primary, we saw the state Republican Party supporting Judge Skrenok. We saw Wisconsin Manufacturers and Commerce spending heavily in support of Judge Skrenok. Eric Holder, the former Attorney General's new political action committee, they have indicated that they will play in Wisconsin in the April election, perhaps in the Supreme Court race. You've had some concerns about special interest money and the role it's playing. I would imagine you may have those concerns again this time around.
Yeah, I'm very concerned about what this race is going to look like in the next couple of months. To have those kind of special interests that often play on issues that are not really issues for the court, how tough somebody was on a criminal case, sort of these personal attacks that happen from these unknown entities. We don't know who donates to them. And their agendas are not the agendas they run the ads on. They run the ads on things that they will think that it will sway people on a particular criminal case, a sex offense kind of case. So those kind of ads and that involvement is what has caused me to really question whether we still want to have an elected judiciary. And I think it's going to be a bad race in that sense because of the outside money.
You're still thinking maybe appointing justices and then having them reconfirmed is a better route to go?
I do, because of this money issue. The reserve judges try to do something on recusal. It's very little we can do in a state because of the United States Supreme Court saying people can have these independent groups, and our court saying they can coordinate with the campaigns of the candidates. We don't know who those people are, and their ads don't even have to be truthful. And I think that it's hard for people to decide who they really want to have sitting on that court.
Speaking of ads, and this will be, I guess, the final question. You sat on the state Supreme Court. You know the kinds of cases that come before the court. We are likely to see ads probably from both Judge Skrenok and Judge Dallet about how they're tough on crime. How much do justices actually deal with criminal cases?
Well, they don't deal with criminal cases very often, and the issue of sentencing is almost never, ever, ever an issue before the Supreme Court.
It's not terribly relevant, actually,
Not
to
relevant at all.
the job of a justice.
Not relevant at all, because the trial judge has a lot of discretion on a sentencing, and it is extremely rare that you would get a sentencing case up there. You might have a case on search and seizure or police conduct, but it's still a very small minority compared to all the other kinds of cases, family cases, all the political cases. We're going to have a lot more. There are going to be cases with Foxconn, we can predict it, and all the other kind of civil cases. And the court only has been deciding about 60 a year. So the criminal sentencing part of it is not part of the role of a Supreme Court justice.
Former Wisconsin Supreme Court Justice Janine Geske, it's good to have you back on the program.
Thank you. Thanks, Mike.
I'll be moderating a debate later this week between candidates Rebecca Dallett and Michael Scrennock. The debate will be Friday night at Marquette University Law School. It will air live starting at 7 o'clock on WISN TV in Milwaukee, and you can also see it. It'll be live streamed on WISN.com. Coming up next on Upfront, Milwaukee's bid to land a major national political convention and the case organizers are making for the city and its new arena.